What's going on, everyone? So I am doing a little bit of an appreciation post for my continued enjoyment of Star Wars Unlimited, talking about the state of Star Wars Unlimited, reflecting on some of the comments, some of the big things that have happened in the meta. And I figured I'd do this because over the past week and a half, we've had a lot of conversation about the Planetary Qualifiers, about the meta, and about all this different stuff going on. I know a lot of people are either super frustrated or, well, taking a different approach. Usually it's two different extremes that battle each other out on Reddit, the comment section, and in general. But I wanted to take a moment to take a little bit more of a nuanced approach, talk about some things that we have to look forward to, a few things that I think FFG needs to look into, and some things that could result in, some really cool things coming for the game, or maybe some concern needs to sprout up. But first things first, guys, I love this game. And I think one thing that a lot of us forget is at the end of the day, even if someone is harshly critiquing the game, oftentimes, again, not always, but oftentimes it comes from a place of, I want this game to be good. And I think they're taking it in a direction that's not, and therefore I am extremely upset and I need to voice that opinion. So we'll talk about a few things. Before I do, big thank you to my patrons over on Patreon. You might have noticed that the actual scrolling thing has to get smaller and smaller because I keep getting more and more. Might have to do 2 rows, 2 columns or whatever. But big thank you to everyone who's been supporting the channel. We played some games the other day. It was absolutely a blast. And, we've had a lot of conversation and, of course, just in general interaction with you all. So that's been really cool. Also, I have a TCG play link in the description down below. Be sure to use it for all your Star Wars Unlimited card needs. The first thing I want to talk about is the Planetary Qualifiers, the meta, and the big discussion that's been happening over the past week and a half, 2 weeks. So going into the Planetary Qualifiers, one of the big things was Boba Fett. Okay, and I have the card list behind me because I didn't know what really else to put up. But Boba Fett has been kind of the boogeyman of, in general, Star Wars Unlimited since the beginning of the game. It was always, oh my gosh, how does this guy have a ridiculous stat line? Like, how do they even let this through game development, or the development of the game and playtesting, all this stuff? And one thing was, how is he going to show up in the Planetary Qualifiers, the most competitive tournaments in the format? Well, fortunately or unfortunately, whether you came in with like, okay, I'm going to run Boba Fett and I hope it's still pretty good, or I really hope I don't see Boba Fett, Boba Fett is vast majority of the meta. And that is something that I think continues to bother some people. And again, this tends to be 2 extremes. We have one extreme saying this needs to be fixed or it's going to be the death of the game. And the other portion that's like, competitive Star Wars Unlimited doesn't even matter. You shouldn't even care about this. And again, as I said, we're all coming from this, generally speaking, at the approach of we want this game to be good. So the people who are saying, okay, the game's going to die, really do feel, generally speaking, again, I don't like to assume people's feelings and all that type of stuff, but generally when we consider these types of things, so I've done YouTube for a very long time, what this means is, hey, this seems to be a problem, and I think a lot of the players who might be trying to get into the competitive Star Wars Unlimited are going to feel as if this really limits their creativity and their options joining into the format, and therefore Boba needs a second look. There's also the flip side where people are saying, okay, don't worry about it because the vast majority, the casual players make up, well, tends to be like 90-95% of the community. And then like the 5% are the people who are voicing their opinions. They don't even care generally about Boba Fett. Most of these people are coming to their Friday store showdowns or their Friday night Star Wars Unlimited. And you could see from the store showdowns, we still see random decks pop up. And most of the time, not a lot of Boba Fett's, mainly because people aren't bringing Boba Fett's because it's an expensive deck. It is the top tier meta. People like to play whatever they want on their Friday night showdowns or whatever. So there is merit to both ways. And don't worry about it because the vast majority of the casual player base is going to be, not bothered by this, but there is a certain balance. Competitive Star Wars Unlimited, this is something that I've really appreciated from FFG, seems to be getting a lot of support. And in order to kind of expand oftentimes the area of influence, it needs to be both in the competitive space and in the casual space. Having a healthy competitive environment allows people to really chase down and really figure out the meta and figure out everything that's kind of nuanced, kind of hard to figure out for the average casual player. But then you also need that portion of the player base that is casual, because that's the vast majority of your expenditure, the vast majority of people who are collecting cards and kind of just playing because they enjoy the characters. At the end of the day, this is a Star Wars game, which gives it a major advantage over a lot of other potential new starting TCGs, because a lot of people are invested into the IP over the actual gameplay. And the gameplay is obviously something that I personally enjoy because I wouldn't be here, but it is something to remember. So there's a mix. And I think this kind of leads me to the next point, which is what we have in front of us. The most current thing that we're all getting ready for is set 3. We finally got our starter decks dropped. November 8th is actually what I have written down here for Twilight of the Republic. So that's coming in just under a month, which is really, really close. So two things that kind of is really, really important for a lot of the vocal community. One, how much creativity, how much of set 3, and what is it going to do for decks coming forward? Are we going to get more budget options? Are there going to be fun options to play in your casual Friday nights? Are there going to be more competitive options? That's one of the big questions. And the second question is particularly related to Boba Fett and partially Sabine. Are we going to have competition, or are these leaders going to envelop set 3 as well as set 2 and set 1 and still remain on top? I think both those questions are something that are people really looking forward to, and it's something that I've talked about a lot. Are we going to see, Ahsoka Tano be a viable aggro option compared to Sabine? And so far, it looks like this has a lot of potential. Are we going to see, maybe something like General Grievous or Maul, or maybe like Yoda come in and actually be a representative of a different archetype that actually competes at the highest level, maybe even more than Boba Fett? These shakeups provide a lot of longevity to the game, and these sets really do kind of represent seasonal changes. And I've mentioned this before, but for those of you that play like ARPGs, basically the way these games are structured is you come in, you join the game, you play for a couple weeks, maybe a month, and then you kind of teeter off a little bit, maybe play here and there, and then you join back in for the next season where you kind of get reset. And that is what these set releases are aiming to do, is jump in with a bunch of new cards, hopefully shake up the meta, hopefully shake up some enjoyment, and introduce more options, as well as improve upon the previous released options. And that's what we're waiting for. These set releases represent a massive period of the game, because you have basically the next 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, whatever it ends up being, depends on if they continue to stay on their release schedule, of these options for you. And if it's a meta that people tend to not enjoy, or maybe something that kind of reinforces the current meta, maybe we'll have a little bit of a competitive downturn. However, and this is really important to note, there's also future things down the road past this. The other thing that we have to keep in mind is actual rotation. So they mentioned that they're going to be rotating sets out. Not sure how that process is going to be, but for set 1, for example, Boba Fett and Sabine Wren are by far the 2 biggest hated decks outside of the control variants, because people just hate control in general. But if you're to target 2 specific leaders and their hatred towards them, it would be Boba Fett and Sabine. These are the first to rotate out. This whole set, Boba Fett, the unit, Sabine Wren, the Rebel aggro package, all of that type of stuff is set to rotate out at the first notice of rotation. Whether they wait for 6, 9 sets, I'm not sure. Maybe it's a year and a half, 2 years down the line when rotation happens. But it's something that really does change up everything about both the competitive format and the casual format, because suddenly you're not able to enter your casual tournaments with a lot of these cards that you've been playing. Okay. And this is something that I think a lot of people tend to maybe meme about, because it ends up being a little bit further down the line when you actually do get access to the rotation and see the changes. But I'll say this, it is something that really does invigorate the competitive format, generally speaking. I know Magic the Gathering does this all the time, where they'll have this period of time where the meta is just super stale and people aren't excited. They say this is the worst standard has ever been, and then rotation happens and suddenly you're like, wow, this format's really good. I like these past couple sets. Some sets rotated out. Suddenly, it's a really good format, and there's no changes that need to be made. This literally happened within the last like 2 years, 3 years of Magic standard history. Literally from like 2021 to 2024, they went through this roller coaster of worst format ever, best format ever, worst format ever. Okay, format's in great spot, don't need to make any changes, don't make any bans, etc. So something to keep in mind is that if this is supposed to be a long-term game, you will have these more lull periods. Not saying that we're even in one, but it's something that kind of needs to be looked at because this is ideally a long-term TCG. So you can't necessarily rely on a single set, 2 sets to make the game function. The next thing that we have is new boosters. And this is, again, a very polarizing discussion. So it's not with set 3. We're not going to see like Obi-Wan Kenobis in Carbonite boosters or anything like that. I talked a little bit about the comparison to collector boosters. We don't know what Carbonite boosters are going to be yet, but based on the image that was shown, it's very likely to be adjacent to collector boosters, having these packs that are a little bit higher rarity for way additional cost. And I think a lot of you pointed out something that is the counter argument to kind of what I was talking about in my previous video, which was there are a lot of people who just want to collect the cards. And that's something that is in that 90 to 95%. A lot of those people who are just playing casually are here to play. Hey, I want to build a Gar Saxon deck. Hey, I want to build a Jabba the Hutt deck. And I just want to collect the cards and have some fun. Collector boosters do kind of appeal to that, where you come in, you buy a collector booster because you're interested in those higher rarity, higher arts, whatever it is. And you're like, I just want to have some fun and buy a booster, and I want it to be a good pack. That's where the collector boosters come in, and they do help a lot. The secondary market and the downsides of collector boosters tend to really matter for that 5 to 10%, the competitive space. That's where a lot of people are a little bit more irritated or a little bit more, I guess you'd say, bothered by collector boosters. But keep in mind, the new boosters mean 2 things for the game. One, they are looking to potentially monetize their game a little bit more and expand their merchandising for cards. That's actually usually a good thing for the longevity of the game, which is something that I appreciate. So I do like that. The second thing is, well, maybe this is something that actually does appeal to more of the player base than we might initially expect because of the way they decide to release these Carbonite boosters. Maybe they're not nearly as expensive as Magic the Gathering collector boosters. The difference between like $6 and $30, which is vastly different, where it actually prices out a lot of the casual players from even interacting with that system. So we don't know how they're going to release it, but that could also be the case. All of this, again, reinforcing the point that this seems to be a healthy kind of process for Star Wars Unlimited and the development of the game. And at the end of the day, that is what I care about the most. I love this game. I love Star Wars. I love trading card games. The combination of the two just makes me extremely happy. And I love making videos for the game. I'm really excited about set 3. I'm also pretty excited about set 4 because of Space Leaders. I think that's going to, well, not saying that that's confirmed, but most likely Space Leaders is going to add another whole new dynamic to the game. And there's a lot of options that they have going forward because they've only scratched the surface. Again, we could have all sorts of variations of sets going forward. We could have all sorts of variations of cards going forward. And there's a lot of Star Wars to come in contact with. If they end up getting the rights for older Star Wars content, then maybe we'll see some of that. And this bodes well for Star Wars Unlimited. And so I love the game. I hope you all are going to continue to play the game. I know that it can be a little bit tricky if you are a competitive player and you feel like the meta is a little bit stale. Hopefully, this is something that FFG kind of taps into for set 3 and maybe has that design aspect in mind. And without proper testing, because we haven't been able to test the entirety of the format, and I haven't been able to test even the cards that we do have right now all that often because it's hard to actually get in games. It's something that we'll just have to keep in mind going forward. But at the end of the day, most of the casual players are here because they want to play Hondo, they want to play Hunter, they want to play Bosk, and they want to join in and play some Star Wars. At the end of the day, that's great, and I hope that that appeals to a lot of people going forward. Thanks for watching, everyone. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section down below about the state of Star Wars Unlimited and where you feel like the game is going. I think there's a lot of things that are positive, a lot of things that are exciting, especially in the next month. I will say at the end of this video, I'm extremely excited for set 3, and I'm also extremely excited for Planetary Qualifiers, Galactic Qualifiers, Galactic Tournaments. I forgot the name of it at this point, but the overall competitive ladder for Star Wars Unlimited. Just watching it as a spectator, even though, you know, I'd love to play in it. I'm in an isolated area, so I can't even get access to them. I just love the support that they're dishing out for this, and I cannot wait to see more. And I'll see you all for the next one.